Thank you. Exciting for me to speak to you today in Aarhus. I am sitting in Uppsala. So thank you for inviting me. I am a researcher in computing education research in Uppsala, and have done research on computing education for almost 10 years soon. But I'm also, and one of my research areas is on identity, and there I'm working together with science identity researchers, so in a very broad field actually with researchers from Copenhagen that you might know if you have worked with diversity, Lars Ulriksen, Henriette Holmgart, who are also doing research on identity, and who are actually also looking not only in science education, but quite broad into all different disciplines. So I'm working with these wonderful researchers and have quite some interest. And also that helps me then to understand and make sense of diversity challenges in computing that I will focus on today. But I think that even if you're not so familiar with computing, you will gain questions that you can ask if you are working on diversity that help you think about education and also developing education. So I think this can be interesting, should be interesting, I hope, for a very large audience. So I am talking today about what it means to fit in as a student, what it entails to fit in. Who do students become? And when I started my research, I was very interested in computing as a discipline, and I thought that I would learn more about computing by following students through their education and know how different students make sense of computing. So that was my first idea when I started to do research. But then I quite quickly noted that, maybe I shouldn't ask who do students become or want to become, but rather who are they allowed to become? Who are they encouraged to become? Especially education is a field where the students are very dependent on the environment where we as educators are the ones judging and evaluating the students, assessing the student. So we are the ones who recognize the students for their competencies. So they are by far not free to become who they want to become, as I will tell you in the following. And in terms of questions, I think if you only have like a quick question for me to clarify things, please raise your hand or write in the chat, then maybe someone can keep an eye on that and let me know if there's like questions that are about clarification. And otherwise, if you have more philosophical or questions such as what should we do, wait for the end and we can discuss this together. All right, so I said I did a longitudinal interview study, and that's what I did when I did my PhD work. And as you can see, I followed students who two cohorts, a computer science cohort and a IT engineering cohort. And I asked all the students, and these studied together in this university where I did my research. So I asked all these students in the beginning of their studies to tell me, to write an essay about what they are interested in, their previous experiences, and then also what do they think about computing in their future career, what are their ideas for their future, and also what expectations do they have for their educations, what do they want to learn. So from these essays, I chose purposely fully students who were very different. I chose students with different interests. For example, I had this art student who was writing about that she was very interested in combining arts and computer science. I had a political science student. He was a student that had almost finished a political science degree. He just had a few credits left. but was thinking that maybe he wouldn't get a job, so he started to study computing. And then, of course, also students who were rather traditional, really interested in programming, who had many experiences, or a lot of experience. So I had these different students that were about 24 that I then followed every year and talked to them at the end of each study year, after the first study year, after the second, after the third. And then after these interviews, I also had meetings with them to talk about my results and also get some feedback and more interests, more insight. And I think my major finding was quite a surprise for me, because the students would talk so differently after just a year. I still remember me sitting in the interviews in the second year. The first interview with a student who actually, that was my art student I talked to you about, or told you about. And at the end of the second year, this student wouldn't say a word about art anymore. And she was telling me about back-end programming as the interesting thing. And I was asking her, what do you mean by back-end programming? And the student would tell me, well, back-end programming, that's the really difficult problems. And well, they are hardly visible to users, hardly noticeable, actually, these problem solutions. And I was sitting there thinking like, what happened? Last year she was talking about art, and now she's talking about solving problems that are not visible. And I asked her what happened, and she said, I don't know. I just changed my interest. So what's the deal? So somehow after the second year or round of interview, I realized that my whole study setup doesn't really work, perhaps. I will give you another example of this political science student who in the first year says, well, the connection between computer science and political science comes naturally. He was very interested in globalization, and he told me that as a political science political science person, he can develop technology in a very different way from everyone else who doesn't know about political science. And I thought that was so exciting because, yeah, I was really interested to wondering how would this person then engage in computing and use computing to drive globalization. Well, in year 2, the student was talking as the art student, saying that I'm not thinking much about politics anymore. Now I'm mostly interested in back-end problem solving. Then I was, after the second year interviews, I was thinking, well, let's see what happens next year, because then the students will learn about human-computer interaction. So they will get to learn about developing systems for users, for people. And then I was thinking maybe the interest in art or politics will come back. But no, that mostly didn't happen. But instead, the students positioned themselves as a computer scientist who really doesn't deal with this subjective user experience. That was strange. So, for example, Matthew in year 3 says, I think one misses a lot when combining politics and computer science. Political science is about discussion without getting anywhere. The only way to come to a point of right or wrong is to look at reality. In computer science, it often feels like I want to do a better solution. One tries, can I do this algorithm slightly faster? As this is a theoretical natural science discipline, one can always test the solution in a very small, secure environment. So you can see there is quite some opposition. Political science is about discussion, but you don't get anywhere. And in computer science, you do solutions, they are faster, and they are like, you look at them in a small environment and test them to make sure it's correct. So yes, I was, as I told you, wondering about this, quite surprised. And then I asked more and more questions about how much agency do these students actually have? What is the role of the social context? What are norms and values? What is valued to learn about and do and know about? And that's what you can use identity for. I kind of switched my analytical focus from thinking of identity more as something that's possessed, so you describe people's interest, to thinking of identity and looking at identity as something that is outside the person, something that is constructed in social interaction, negotiated. And I thought that the notion participation by Love and Wenger is very valuable. So I was then interested in understanding doing, thinking, and feeling as it is negotiated among different people. So I wanted to really understand this whole body of experience of what it means to do computing, to see. I was thinking that if I understand that, this back-end problem solving, this being like really tricky and fun, then I also will know more about these student trajectories and why they changed the way they changed. So in the following, I will tell you a little bit about participation in computing. And you could, if you're not working with computing or IT, you could think about what would participation look like in my field? What do they find fun doing or knowing, thinking? In computing, it looks like that. I have described 7 different ways of participating in computing, whereby 3 are most dominant, like the students talk about it most of the time, or a lot of the times when you talk to them about who they are and who they want to be. And that is participation as creating, technical problem solving, and problem solving for others. And I will start by talking about creating. That is mostly about creating digital artifacts. The student, as Jalen says, as a student, you discuss different mini projects that you're engaged in. So Jalen was talking about the students sitting together in their breaks. And then you talk about, for example, one person was doing some kind of a blinking light thing for a jacket. So he had a little Arduino kit that he programmed. So what is in focus here is to be able to create something that works, that does something. So for example, something that blinks, and what you demonstrate to the other students and what you're recognized for is that you are able to create a digital artifact that you can show works, and you can talk about how you did that. Then there is participation as technical problem solving. And that's an experience that the students start talking more about in the second study year. As they learn, much of their studies is about solving problems. And I'll tell you one quote that I thought was very characteristic and had a lot of information. Like Amari, he says, we have this Bible, a thick book which contains a lot of algorithms and data structures. And you can think of Matthew, who says that now he wants to do algorithms, making them fast. So they have this book, the Bible, that contains all these algorithms and data structures. It's very complete, and it only contains necessary text. I asked, how did you use it? And Amari says, and all the names are, of course, not their real names. The book contains a list of different algorithms that you can go through to see, that algorithm is suitable for this problem. And I asked, how did the book get the name Bible? And Amari says, the students have called the book the Bible, because for many students, computer science is all about algorithms and data structures. I think this is a quite rich quote. Something that you, for example, can see is, of course, the Bible. It's something that you believe in. You just think this is, or you learn to believe that this is the book because it's called the Bible. And it's older students who pass on the Bible from year to year and this belief. And also you can see how it's used. You take the book and it helps you to solve these difficult technical problems that are, so that will make you be recognized for being someone who can solve the problems, because you just can go through the list and you find some that works and that you can use to solve these difficult problems. So that way you can become and you can belong, you can become a part of the community, and you can belong and be recognized for someone that is belonging. And solving these back-end problems, solving problems that are hardly visible to anyone else who doesn't know about computing, it's also quite a special group. You get to be a part of this group that is special, that others outside computing wouldn't really know what they can do, but among each other they can recognize each other, because if they can show that they can solve back-end problems. And then you have this Bible. Finlay was one of the students who had quite a broad interest in computing. He had worked as a consultant before. He was talking a lot about contributing and helping people when he started. In year 3, he was also talking very much about the back-end problem solving. And he explains emotions. When you have managed to divide the problem into parts and merge the small solutions, and when you in the end have created something that gives the results that you were aiming for, when you realize that this can work, then I feel this is fun. And then you become a junkie that you want to feel this feeling again and again. And then you work towards that feeling that can exist in other situations as well. So here you can see how these students are socialized into like viewing the world in these and themselves as someone who can solve these difficult backend problems. So then in the 3rd year, as I told you, they have this human-computer interaction course where they get to learn about users, ethics, sustainability. And then the students, for example, say that, well, the HCI course was about improving a user's interaction with a program. We tried to do interviews with users, and that was quite interesting, something that I didn't think about earlier. So what that quote shows is that's quite a different way of engaging, learning. You do interviews, and something that the students don't think about earlier. But it's not really something that you can find interesting and take up, because as I show you the following quote of a student talking about the teacher in this course. The teacher of the human-computer interaction course was very interested in HCI, and we thought he's not a real computer scientist, and he laughs. But then it turned out that he actually could program and that he was as good as we are, just that he had an interest in that which was a bit fuzzy. So you can see that if you are someone who shows interest in these very different ways of doing and engaging, then you are questioned. People think that means you can't program. One of the students also told me that those students who choose to specialize in HCI, those are the ones who can't program, and those are the ones who take the easy way out. It's easy to learn and know HCI. And then in the end, they get an exam, so a certificate as everyone else. So yeah, and you can also see the separation. Those HCI people, they are doing things that are fuzzy, while computing is about something that's more concrete. It's about right or wrong, faster or slower. So that then shows that or suggests that there is dichotomies or separations reproduced in higher education that that can be captured by the following terms. Included and recognized is, for example, backend programming, doing that which is invisible, hardly noticeable. The technical stuff that is logical, objective, and difficult. And then you have something that's maybe marginally relevant or maybe excluded. So it's not them. It's not what computing people do with usually. So the HCI teacher, they were thinking might be a psychologist. And that's also, if you do front-end programming, then that's like the opposite of back-end programming. That's what other people do. That's about design. And that would be the visible, the less technical stuff. And then you would also have to deal with the user and his or her experience. So that's subjective. That's not what they want to deal with or should be dealing with. And that's also easy. So if you have to deal with this, you can do it, and then you just learn about it in the evening, the students told me. So you see that there's a separation reproduced here that actually relates to, or is quite gendered. Like in the left, you have that which is associated or can be associated to masculinity, like the technical, logic, objective, not subjective, emotional. While on the other hand, you have that which is more feminine, doing like caring for the user. And that's easy. So you can see that there is a status hierarchy established here that's also gendered. And then masculinity standing above that which is coded as femininity. So there is quite, I think, some, I would say, a need for change or educational development. And my results or research suggests that that's quite hard. It's not enough to just have a course, because as you can see, the HCI course didn't help. In fact, it might have even made this value system stronger, because the teacher was like questioned so openly and by the students saying that, oh, he's not a computer scientist. So everyone in the room might have realized that this is not what you should be aiming for, or that's uninteresting for us. So yeah, what could we do is an interesting question. So I was curious to see what really happens in the classroom. So I did a follow-up project where I was asking, how are computing identities constructed in social action among the students, the teachers, the methods, for example, also assessment methods, and the content curriculum. And I also wanted to talk to the students about what they think about such results, and if they think it should be changed, and also the teachers and program coordinators. What opportunities do they see for change? For example, I was thinking that perhaps the programming teacher and the HCI teacher could work together to change that. Yes, so I did participant observations. So I followed the students through two courses, one that had real high status, a programming course that I knew about from the interviews, and then the human computer interaction that now was moved to the second year as a response to my research. So first there was the imperative programming course, and then directly after was the human computer interaction course. And I did workshops with the students and teachers. And this is what it looked like. Of course, these are not real pictures, but the programming course was packed. Students were standing even because the seats weren't enough. The teacher was live coding and really celebrated by the students as an expert programmer. He would say that he is getting paid for doing this really nerdy thing. And then he was referring to programming. The human computer interaction course, the teacher was standing in an empty classroom that was constructed or there for about 100 students, but only 15 out of 120 in this cohort showed up. So the classroom was empty, signaling that this is not important. So I am describing, it's not published, but it's on its way, two identities as two professional identities and one learner identity. The one of an expert programmer that's really desirable for the students, It's someone who can easily code. He can fluently express his or her ideas through code, and he's also talking to others through code. He can, or she can, dig deep in the back end and does magic. So the teacher would sometimes code in the breaks very fast. The students would tell me, I don't really understand what he's doing, but he's good, he's fast. And then the teacher would, after the break, stand up and say, I have done some magic, and explain what he had done. The learner in this course dedicate all their time to learn programming. This is the course where you learn the real stuff, the student said. This is the best course ever, but don't fall behind. So they give up all their hobbies. They code the whole day during the labs, and when they come home, they continue on the sofa or in the bed. So it's quite a stereotypical behavior that they have, this coding day and night, or that they adopt to become an expert programmer. The user-dedicated designer that the HCI teacher stood for, or was performing as, is someone that doesn't design programs but work and live the world with a computer that's described as fuzzy. So it's as there is a computer and people. So it's not, you can't really say where the computer ends, or as there is, like, it's extended into the real world, and it requires a fusion of skills. And something that's quite interesting is that the teacher was not only showing what it means to be a user-dedicated designer, but also showing what it means to deal with the status one has as such a person in computing, saying that, oh, 15 people here, nice representation, no one listening to me. So, or your study directors want you to learn this, which might have been a statement because the teacher knows that by showing too much enthusiasm, he or she might be questioned. So, conclusion. Education is encouraging certain ways of being and becoming. And it's also allowing for certain kinds of being and becoming. Some ways of being and becoming are not legitimate. And if you follow such paths and in a way, like if you are someone who expresses an interest in humans, or contributing to a better world, you might be questioned and have to defend your technical competencies, and you need to prove that you also can do the other things. So you are suspected not to be able to do that, which then puts you under pressure and might kind of imply that you perform less good. I'm thinking of stereotype threat, and I could tell you more about this research. But yes, so that's a problem. And as I told you earlier, I suggested that there's a status hierarchy reproduced that is relates to gender and hierarchies there. And working for change is quite complex, I think. It's a value system that we have to change that exists in the society at large. But as I have argued together with John Koch-Svedberg, that could be one role higher education can play to change this value system. And if you're interested, this book just appeared, and there is one chapter from me written for teachers and students. It's in Swedish, but I think many Danes can read that. Thank you for listening. So that's basically what I talked to you about today. Questions we could be discussing is like, what does being and becoming entail at your place, in your discipline? what competencies are valued by the students and teachers, and what competencies are assessed. And rather than kind of forming the students into one or two, like a narrow identity, I think we need to find ways to have an education that allows students to grow in their diversity, because I think diversity, not just me, but diversity is urgently needed for finding new, radically new ways of living in, and finding, for this, for a more sustainable world. Thank you.